Hello and welcome. My name is Dr. Raj Persaud. I'm a consultant psychiatrist. I'm based in Harley Street in London, where I work in private practice as a psychiatrist. And I'm delighted to be joined by Nicola Marting. Now, I've known Nicola for many, many years. And I have to say that, in my opinion, and I've known many people who specialize in this thing called coaching, she is the best. She is the best of the best. So Nicola Marting is a cognitive behavioral coach. She's passionate about coaching for everyone. She believes that everyone needs a coach. Nicola works not only on a private basis, but as an executive coach in corporations. She's an international trainer, has trained individuals in Dubai, Jordan, and Finland. Depending on requirements, Nicola provides bespoke training for individual organizations. So, Nicola, many people will be aware of the term therapist and therapy and psychotherapist, psychoanalyst, psychiatrist, psychologist. These are very complicated. It's a complicated field for people to get their head around. And now there's this term called coach, and people think about life coaching and executive coaching. So let me start by asking you, what is a coach?
Okay, so a coach deals with the non-clinical population. So we deal with everybody. And I have, as I've already said, believe that everybody can do with a coach, because athletes have coaches, singers have coaches, actors have coaches. So if the rest of us want to be excellent in our fields, it makes sense to employ a coach. And my belief is that if you've got a good coach, you see them for a minimum of 1 hour every month, this will transform your life and will keep you on track.
Okay, so you talked about athletes having coaches. That's a good example, because athletes have coaches because they want to be better. Let's
Yes.
talk a bit about what people want when they arrive for coaching.
Okay, so basically we go through, first of all, what their problems are, and then we change them into goals. So we then know what actually they do want. So that's the first thing. And then we put them in an order of preference. Which goal do they want to work on first? And then we'll work with that. Once that's done, we'll go to the next goal, and so on and so forth. We tend not to work on too many things at once. It's best to just focus on one area at a time.
And do you think people have trouble being clear about what their goals are?
Yes, I think lots of people don't really have any goals. They've got vague ideas, they've got wishes, they've got wants, and they're not specific about it. And so part of coaching is having a look at what they really, really want and seeing whether or not it's possible. And of course, it may not be possible immediately. They may have to do it maybe over a 5-year period that they're going to achieve their goals. It's not an instant fix or anything like that, but they will be very clear about what they want, how they're going to get there, and what they've got to do to get there. And the coach helps the client to remain focused and accountable. So it brings the client into awareness of what they need to do and what they're responsible for doing. So the responsibility is obviously with the client to carry out the behavior, if that makes sense.
Now, that's a really interesting one, where people might say there's a difference with psychotherapy, which is that you said the responsibility is with the client. So what are they responsible for? And what do they tend to make a mistake over in terms of what they think the coach or the therapist is responsible for?
Okay, so often people coming to a coach or a therapist, they believe that they're going to perform magic and that they're going to do all the work. This certainly isn't the case with coaching, because coaching is very active. You have to participate. You have to carry out in your daily life what you've agreed to do in the session. So that makes you accountable, because you're going to be asked the next time, have you done X, Y, and Z? And if not, why not? What went wrong? And so from that point of view alone, having a coach is really helpful, because you've got to explain why you didn't do what you said you were going to do and what happened. But it's also experimental. So we try out different things, because not everything is going to work with everybody, and different things will work in different situations. So we try to make it fun. We try to push people to make it challenging, but not overwhelming.
Could you give us some examples, if possible, of the kind of goals people have come to you with?
Okay, so in corporations, the goals are often to get promotion, to get pay rises, to manage their boss, to manage difficult people in the organization. Sometimes they're being bullied, not so good. And then, or they just have problems with, they've got presentations they've got to do, and they're very anxious about it and they want help with that. or they're not managing their time properly, or they've got problems at home, which, are creating untoward emotions. They need help with dealing with them, because I do think you've got to look at the whole person as a human being, and then as a money-making machine or high flyer second.
Okay, what about that was an executive coaching? Is there any chance you could give us some idea of the kind of goals people have with this thing called life coaching? And what's the difference between life coaching and executive coaching, if there is a difference?
Okay, well, the two obviously overlap, because when you're doing life coaching, you tend not to be dealing with business matters, but you can be. So you're really having a look at all the domains. So you're looking at their relationships, you're looking at their families, you're looking at their careers, you're looking at their hobbies, you're looking at their finances. You're really going across the whole spectrum, exactly having a snapshot of where their life is now and then where they want to go. So it's a little bit like being the boatman. You've got to take them from one island to another. So they're here now, and this is where they want to get to. And then we're going to sort of guide them across the water to the island that they actually want.
So having a coach is like trying to take charge of your life.
Yes.
Right? So athletes want to take charge of their lives because they have a clear goal, which is, let's say, to be the champion at Wimbledon.
Yes.
But they also have structure because they've got tournaments coming
Yes.
up, and they have a sense of which there's training. So what about that equivalent of structure in people's lives and this notion of trying to take charge of their lives?
Okay, so if we want to have a successful life, or as successful as we can, we need to think about what athletes do as well, because they take exercise, they eat right, they sleep right, they're very careful about how they spend their time. And again, we need to look at those sorts of areas within somebody else's, an ordinary person's life who isn't training for the Olympics or anything like that, to see what they need to do, because they're probably doing all sorts of things that maybe time wasting, going in the wrong direction, in the wrong relationships, in the wrong job, etc., etc. So we're going to look at every aspect of their life that may be hindering them in getting them from where they are now to where they want to go. I think of it as being a little bit like being a psychological detective. We're spreading it all out. We're seeing exactly what's going on, and then exactly where they want to go. How are they, in cognitive behavioural therapy coaching, which is what I do, we basically look at three main areas. We're going to look at how they're thinking, we're going to look at how they're behaving, and how they're feeling. So those are the three main operating systems. There are two areas that we have control over. One is to a certain extent. One is the way we think, and then the other is how we're behaving. And so we're going to analyze that in quite a great detail to see what they're actually doing now, and actually what they could be doing that would make all the difference.
A lot of people, when they hear about coaching, executive coaching and life coaching, to begin with, begin to think like they think it's like a money-making enterprise. It's a waste of time. We ought to be able to coach ourselves, is what they're thinking, I think,
Yes.
is their first response. What's your response to that point?
Okay, so what I would say is that the aim of coaching is to enable people to coach themselves at the end of the day. That is definitely one of the aims. But until they know how to do it, it's very good to have a coach to tell you what you should be doing and to look at it for you. The other thing about coaching, the magic of coaching, if you like, is that we are asking powerful questions, and we are actively listening and creating inspirational goals. And that there's something to do with asking powerful questions, asking the right questions, listening, keeping your mouth closed, shutting up, waiting for the answer. Now, when you do that, when somebody's really, really listening to you, magic seems to happen. People seem to be able to dredge up from the unconscious mind brilliant solutions to their problem. And one of the things that I can say is that I often have clients and they come and they tell me what their problems are. And I think, oh, yes, I know exactly what you should be doing. This is what I'm thinking in my mind. But then I don't tell them. I ask them the questions, let them come up with the solutions. And they usually come up with things which are quite staggeringly just right for them, things I never would have thought of. And another point about that is people don't like being told what to do. So the less I interfere and give them advice, the better it is. When people come up with their own solutions, they're much more likely to carry out the action. I don't know why, but that's just how it is. We just don't like being bossed around as human beings.
Okay, but what about this notion that you said about powerful questions, important questions, deep questions? Tell us a bit more about that, because I agree with you. And I think actually that's one of the places where therapists, I'm collapsing therapy and coaching into the same thing. I know that you may not approve of that, but the dynamic of a professional trying to help someone else, they're very poor at asking great questions. A lot of life boils down to asking the right question. Tell us a bit more about that.
Okay, so for example, you've got a client who comes to see you and they're going on and on and on about all their problems. And then you just stop and you say, well, what is it that you do want? What is it that you do want? So immediately you put them into another frame of thinking, and then they're focusing on what they actually want rather than all the things that are wrong in their life. And that is terribly powerful. If you just do that alone, that is very, very powerful. Because then they can make a list. I did this myself when I was going through a difficult period, is I made a list of all the things that I actually wanted to happen in my life. And I'd have a little look at it every single day. And after about 3 months, I found that they were beginning to happen. But I was very focused on what I wanted to happen rather than all the things I didn't want to happen. So that's one area. What was the other bit of the question?
Well, we're asking what counts as a good question, and the art of asking a good question.
So what is it that you really want? How are you going to get there? What have you already tried? Can you think of any other ways that you might, any other options or any other things that you might do? Or do you know anybody who has succeeded in this area? And what are they actually doing? So it's asking these open-ended, searching questions, and the how question is very good. How are you going to do it? How are you going to achieve it? What do you need to know? What's missing? What do you need to do to achieve the same thing as somebody else? These are what I call powerful questions. And then the key is to keep your mouth shut, not say anything. Give the client as much time as they need to actually think about the answers. And it can be quite a long time. Do not interrupt, because you're interrupting the thinking process. And the thing for clients is that they love to be listened to. It's, you know, being properly listened to is it's a treat. It's a gift. It enables them to think creatively.
So, this is a debate that you and I have had before, because we've talked before and debated many things before. We have very lively conversations, so you have to brace yourself for the next thing I'm going to debate with you. We've had a debate, haven't we, about how much help the therapist or the coach should give the client. And we've discussed the fact that your view is that because people come to see me in Harley Street and there's a lot of word of mouth recommendation, they arrive expecting the miracle doctor to provide the miracle cure, right? So if I keep saying to them things like, well, what are you going to do about it? We've had a debate about the fact they're expecting a little bit more from me than me just pushing the ball back into their court. Now, I understand that point about people come to see me maybe for different reasons to what they may see coming to other people for. But I do feel there is a tension between us, and that doesn't mean I'm right and you're wrong or vice versa, over this notion of how much help. I do tend to make suggestions where I think you would keep the ball in their court and say more like, well, what are you going to do? I tend to say things like, well, you could do this or you could do that. Now, that I agree with you, they still got to go away and do it. Okay. And I think the tension between us on this one is your and you may be right, I may be wrong. I'm not saying I know the answer here.
Well,
you do tend to push the ball more into their court than I tend to. Anyway, in terms of I tend to come up with suggestions where you hold back and wait for them to come up with suggestions.
Yeah.
And over to you. What's your thoughts about that?
So my thoughts is that when I started out in therapy, and even when I started coaching to a large extent, I think, oh gosh, you know, they're paying me this money. I need to be the expert. I need to be the provider of answers. So they think they're getting good value for money. Okay, so you've still got the ideas in your mind as to exactly what they should be doing. but you just hold on to them. And with luck, they will come up with the suggestions you've got lurking in your brain, or something even better. This is my experience. I can only give you my experience. If they really come up with they just don't know, and you're completely sure that they're just drawing blanks, you can then start giving them options, but you don't tell them, look, it's quite obvious, I'm sure you don't do this, but you don't tell them, well, this is what you need to do. Da, 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 da. You say, well, question, had you thought of this? Had you thought of that? Had you thought of the other? So you give them a range of options. And then the thing about that is, so they're questions. They can then pick from that and say, okay, gosh, I hadn't thought of that. Actually, you're right. This is what I need to do. So they are telling me what they need to do because I've given them a range of options. And because they have selected what they think they should do, that is why, in my belief, they're much more likely to carry out the activity.
Yeah, but
So
you are steering them a bit, aren't you? They'll often come up with crazy ideas or ideas that would be terrible if they implemented them. So you I'm sure you don't say, okay, fine, go and try that. You go, let's think a little bit about that plan of yours, and then you are steering it a little bit towards what you know as an expert from many years of experience is a much better idea.
Absolutely. And of course, I actually encourage clients to come up with as many options as possible, as many ideas. I say, it doesn't matter if some of them sound a bit crazy. Let's hear your ideas. And then if they do come up with crazy ideas, and of course we know that people do, then I'm going to question them, further questions on how that would work. How is that going to work for you? How would you achieve that? What would be the ramifications of doing that? So again, it's questions. And then quite often they can then see, okay, actually, that's not quite such a good idea.
Yeah. Okay. So let's pick some examples. Like procrastination, for example. Let's talk a bit about that, because that's a classic thing that people can often see coaching could be helpful, and people are aware of their tendency to procrastinate, and they that's one of the very fruitful areas, I think, for coaching, because people accept that they could need some help in that area, and it's a real problem. And students in particular procrastinate over revising for exams. We procrastinate over filling out our VAT return or the tax return, etc., etc., etc. And in fact, we procrastinate going to the gym or doing the 10 push-ups or etc., etc. So it's a large part of actually a way in which people self-sabotage or handicap themselves. So tell us a bit about procrastination, and also tell us a bit about some of the tools that coaches might use for it.
Yes. Okay. So obviously procrastination is huge, and we all do it. I don't think there's anybody who hasn't procrastinated from time to time. I think one of the main things is to understand what's going on. Understand exactly how painful it is. And I think that's the big thing with procrastination. It's incredibly painful for most people because they know that they should be filling in their tax form. They should be going to the gym. They should be revising for exams. And of course, this is rife now because everybody's revising for their GCSEs and their A-levels and all the rest of it. And there's a lot of paralysis going on. So if they can understand what's going on, why they are procrastinating, and they can see how painful it is. I think this is great, is hugely motivating when they can see that procrastinating really doesn't work, and that they need to make a decision to become a non-procrastinator. So not many people think, okay, I'm going to make a decision, I'm going to become a non-procrastinator, because that, in my observation, is what most successful people, they are not procrastinators. They have a problem, they start sorting it out immediately. They start working out a plan of action, they make telephone calls, they do this, they do that. They don't do what a lot of people do, which is just stew on it for days on end, and it gets worse and worse and worse. They take action. And I do believe that becoming a non-procrastinator is a habit that we can all learn to build within us. But it takes practice. It's not necessarily easy. It's not going to happen overnight, but it can certainly be achieved. But that's the first thing, is to make the decision that you want to be a non-procrastinator. You're going to practice being a non-procrastinator, and you're going to see, and you're going to understand actually what's going on. This is, again, is where the cognitive behavioral coaching comes in, because you can see exactly your behavior, your emotions attached to it, and what the consequences are of that procrastination. And that's very helpful for people. And then they can see, okay, so if you take the tax return thing, well, fortunately for me, I have an accountant who gets on to me on about 1st of May asking me for my accounts. And this is really great. And he badges all his clients throughout the summer. So we're all done. All of us are done by November, which is fantastic. There's none of this business of 25th of January, we're trying to do our accounts. But the thing is, we all feel great, and everyone around us is saying, oh gosh, my tax return. And well, we've done ours, so we feel great. So when people who learn not to procrastinate see the advantages, they're going to be much more willing to put in the effort to do it.
Okay. So you mentioned the cognitive behavioral therapy model. Tell us a bit more about that, though. What is cognitive behavioral therapy model? What is that model?
Okay, so basically, we've taken the cognitive behavioral therapy model and we've adapted it to coaching. And the reason why it works very well in coaching is because it's very focused, it's very structured, we have an agenda, we analyze things, we use an ABC model. One of the best things about cognitive behavioral coaching is that we use an ABC model. And this is where being a psychological detective comes in, and we can see exactly what is going on with the client as far as their feelings, their thoughts, their behavior, and of course their physiology as well. And we'll look in all those areas, and then we'll see where we can intervene that's going to make things better.
Okay. Yeah, great. Just sorry to interrupt you. There's a little bit of a banging noise in your background that's coming and going. Can you hear it, or is it?
I can. Do you know what? I've got building works going on next door. I must.
Oh, I see. Okay. All right. Don't worry. Okay. Hopefully it comes on.
It doesn't normally go on all day, but I do apologize if anyone's hearing banging going on.
Okay. Well, let's stop now for the moment. Okay. So tell us a bit more about the ABC model. Tell us a bit about that.
Right. Okay. So first of all, we're going to have a look at the situation, a specific situation that the client's in, where they may experience procrastination or depression or anxiety or whatever it may be. And then we're going to see, that's the A, that's the situation, the specific situation. Then we're going to look at the C, and we're going to look at the consequences. So they may, because of the situation, they may feel anxious, they may feel depressed, ashamed, guilty, in the case of procrastination. So we're then going to have a look at the B, which is their basic attitudes, their beliefs. So we're going to see what dialogue is going on inside their mind. What are they telling themselves in this situation? And we're going to analyze what thoughts are going on. And typically the thoughts are not helpful. Typically the thoughts are irrational, they're illogical, and there's no evidence for the thoughts. So we're going to have a look at all that. We really need to convince the client that how they are thinking isn't helpful, isn't logical, and isn't truthful. And then we say, well, how would it be if we came up with some thoughts that are actually evidence-based, which are logical, and which are helpful? And then we'll see what the consequences of that would be. And inevitably, the consequences are better when we start thinking rationally in a rational way. And our behavior will follow suit. Because one of the things about having irrational thinking, again, going back to procrastination, it tends to paralyze us. We tend to get stuck. Whereas when we start thinking in a rational way, the situation is the same, but we tend to think in a way that's going to help us to take action. And that is obviously the way to get out of our sticky situations in many cases.
So let's come back to procrastination now then. Tell us a bit more about what the next step would be in procrastination. You discover how painful it is.
Yes,
and then
what very motivating to think, you just don't want to be doing this. And it's so pleasurable to have your tax return done. It's so pleasurable to get fit. It's so pleasurable to, job done, haven't got to think about it, problem sorted. Things like simple things like leaky taps, just ring the plumber, just don't think about it, just ring the plumber, get it sorted. Okay, but there are many reasons why people procrastinate, which I think it might be worth just saying a thing or two about that.
Mm-hmm.
I think the main reason that people procrastinate this is my view, is that they don't really know what they're supposed to be doing. They're not quite sure how to do the job. They're not, the tax return, oh my God, I don't know how to do that. All the receipts, all the expenses, they don't really know how to do it. It doesn't seem at all easy, and they go into overwhelm. And or they're perfectionists. They think everything has got to be done perfectly, and they're really frightened. This is a real fear of doing a job imperfectly. Then they are likely to feel ashamed, to think there's something wrong with them because they can't get on with things, may feel guilty and even depressed. So those are, again, the negative things. So having established all that, we want to think about, okay, so we're going to get you to think right, first of all. We're going to get you to think in a rational way about this. We're going to get you organized. And so I'm a great believer in to-do lists. I think they're great. And then we put stars by all the things that have got to be done today. And we just need to just get on and do it. I think it was Brian Tracy who talked about eating live frogs. Have you heard of that expression, eating live frogs? Brian Tracy, motivational speaker, very good. So he used to talk about eating live frogs. Well, you look at your to-do list, we've all done it, we think, I don't want to do anything on that list. And he would recommend that we eat the ugliest, biggest, nastiest looking frog first of all and get it out of the way first thing in the morning. And then we go on to the next and the next. And just get on with it. You just do it, JDFI. So that's one thing to do. Then breaking tasks down into tiny little bits is obviously makes the task look much less daunting. Then there's another trick, which is just saying, I'm going to do it for 15 minutes. I'm going to revise just for 15 minutes. Or I'm going to go for a walk just for 15 minutes. And the thing is that just for 15 minutes seems doable. But often when we've done 15 minutes, we're into it. So we're likely, not necessarily, but we're likely to do a lot more than 15 minutes. And that's great if you're writing dissertations, essays, doing revision, anything like that, just 15 minutes. The other thing is, I think it's called the 5-second rule. So there's something about doing things straight away. So you're cozily in bed and the alarm goes off, and you wake up and well, the ideal thing is to get out of bed, go to the bathroom, find yourself awake. But no, if you leave it too long, your brain often has a tendency of coming up for reasons why you're going to have another 5 minutes in bed. And maybe you'll have a little look at your phone and you're going to do this and you're going to just relax a little bit more. And the brain will come up with reasons for not doing something. So if you think of doing something, it's good to do it straight away within the 5 seconds before your unconscious brain has come up with all the sorts of reasons as to why you shouldn't.
Well, those are very useful techniques. I want to pick on one that you didn't mention, which I think is also very important, is the idea of making an appointment to do it. So the tax return, you keep putting it off, but you say Monday at 7 p.m. and Monday maybe 3 days away, I will have a go at the tax return.
Yeah.
And often, going back to your point about just doing it for 15 minutes, you can go Tuesday at 7 p.m. I'll have another go, and Wednesday at 7 p.m. So you have 3 appointments to have a go at it. So I think that the classic term is called scheduling, behavioral scheduling. And scheduling is powerful for many reasons. One is it takes the discretion away. If you just start the day thinking, I will try to do the tax return, and lots of things will come along, like watching television or things that get in the way of that. And if you leave it to your discretion, it's very easy not to do it. If you have an appointment to do it at 7 p.m. on Monday, you've taken the discretion away. At 7 p.m. on Monday, whether I feel like doing it or not, I will be doing it. That's a very important point, which seems kind of obvious or subtle, but really is quite profound. The second point about scheduling is if 7 p.m. comes on Monday and you haven't done it, and 7:30's come by and 8 p.m., we know you haven't done something.
Exactly.
Right?
You have.
Yeah. So that's another very important point about scheduling. And all efficient and busy people schedule everything.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah. So actually, there's a really important point there. We're going to get into a slightly gory subject about sex now, but I'm going to bring it up anyway since I've landed myself in it there. There is a very famous marital therapy technique, which is about scheduling sex, because
Oh, yeah.
people get very busy and they get, distracted, and they also get a bit fed up with each other or whatever, or et cetera, et cetera. And scheduling sex, i.e. timetabling it or having it at a certain time every week, for example, or whatever, is one way of making sure it happens. So oddly enough, this scheduling thing works profoundly in a lot of areas where you think spontaneity is meant to be the answer. So scheduling is extremely powerful. Sorry about bringing up that rather gory example, but it was a way of trying to make the point. Anyway, over to you.
Excellent example. And of course, if it's 1 minute past the 7 o'clock start point, you're procrastinating. So you know you've got to get straight back onto it. And just having things like that don't seem as if they should go in the diary, being put in the diary, like sex, yes, goes in the diary. So it's an appointment. It's not optional. It's not optional because it's in your diary and it's an appointment.
Yeah. And we tend to not realize that actually most efficient people make an appointment for practically everything, actually.
Yes, exactly. Exactly.
Yeah. Now, one of the deeper points I want to go back to is the thing about just doing it for 15 minutes. This is extremely important because talking to a lot of motivational gurus and people who specialize in this area of improving control over ourselves and stopping procrastination, this division between not doing something and then fully doing it is one of the cause of the problems. The idea that just doing a very, very small amount of it is better than nothing at all is an extremely powerful idea. So if you're meant to do 100 push-ups, you keep procrastinating it, just doing 1 or 2 is okay. It's way below what you think you ought to be doing. But once you do 1 or 2, you're much more likely to end up at some point doing the 100 than if you just simply don't do any at all. So the smallest start is better than no start. And what people don't realize is the smaller the start, it doesn't really matter. However small you can make it, as long as it's a start, you're well on the way, and it's much better than no start at all. Any reaction to that point?
Well, I couldn't agree with you more. And I mean, if we're talking about getting fit, it's putting the trainers on, it's having your clothes on. That's almost the hardest thing. So if you've got your trainers at the ready, you've got your gym clothes at the ready, get up in the morning, those are the clothes you're putting on, you're much more likely to go to the gym. So, and you, as you say, you start off small, and doing anything is going to really encourage you, because every time, I mean, this is a very good point, every time we do something that we don't actually want to do, it gives us an endorphin hit and we feel better about ourselves. And again, that's likely to encourage us to do more things.
Now, another very important point about this is about the fact that people often say I procrastinate, and they keep telling you all the things they're not doing that they ought to be doing. The bit they leave out very interestingly is what they're doing instead, right? Because maybe it seems trivial to them that they're on their mobile phone or they're calling their friends or whatever, but whatever they're doing instead becomes important to target. Because the more you can stop them doing the thing they're doing instead, then the more that helps them not to procrastinate. And that often unpicking what they're doing instead is revealing a lot more about what's going on in their lives or what the real problem is, as opposed to focusing on what they're not doing. Now, a good example of this is I have many parents that come to me complaining about their teenagers or even older than that, people in the house, and they go, oh, he's doing nothing all day. And then I go, well, he's not literally doing nothing all day, because it's quite difficult to literally do nothing. Okay. So what exactly is he or she doing? And they keep saying, no, he's doing nothing. And I go, no. I mean, even Zen Buddhist monks alone in a monastery find it difficult to do absolutely nothing. So what is he doing or she doing? And they'll go, oh, well, he's on the PlayStation or playing games or watching television. And I go, aha, you see, they're up to something. They are doing something. They're not just doing nothing. And unpacking what they're doing, focusing on that, tells us a lot about what's going on, actually. Any thoughts about that? That kind of that classic phrase, they're doing nothing all day, when in fact they must be doing something.
Yeah, they must be absolutely. They must be doing something. And I think when we look at what they are doing, it's often it's often a distraction. It's, oh gosh, they rather watch television. They're on their phones, etc., or they're reading the papers or something. So in my opinion, those become the rewards. That's what they're allowed to do. So they allow themselves to do that once they've done the task, and that will help procrastinate. So once you've done that, then you can watch your television program, then you can read the papers, then you can scroll through Instagram or whatever. So those things that they are actually doing, I think, can then act as a reward in many cases, because they obviously don't mind doing those things, and they obviously probably quite like doing those things. And I do think rewards are really important when it comes to procrastination. Some people say, I don't know what your views are, some people say that you should penalize yourself if you don't do what you said you're doing. And my experience is that most clients are not going to penalize themselves. They don't really want to, but they are very happy to give themselves rewards for achieving certain tasks. And again, this is another bit of motivation and enjoyment, makes their lives more enjoyable, because we all know that when we're doing stuff that we enjoy, but we've got other stuff that we should be doing, we've procrastinated, we can't ever really enjoy it, because we've got a monkey on our back saying you should be doing your essay, you should be doing your tax return, you should be doing this. And so we can never fully enjoy it. But once we've done the job, celebrate the win, have a cup of coffee, watch some television, have a chat, and you can really enjoy it. So again, it really makes your life so much more pleasurable if you can stop procrastinating.
Now, there's another argument you and I have had. I think you're an excellent coach, and I think that much more of why you're a great coach has something to do with your personality and some of these things that are very difficult to train, your style when you talk. And these are some things that are often referred to as non-specific factors. There's a famous catchphrase in therapy to do with empathy, genuineness, and warmth, E.G. and W, being the key variables that seem to get people better. Does the therapist have empathy, genuineness, and warmth? And this arose out of an idea that became prominent, particularly in the 70s, in the psychotherapy research, because there was a battle back then between the psychoanalysts and the different kinds of therapy, primal scream, cognitive behavioral therapy. There was a war between the different schools of therapy. In fact, when someone tried to tot them up, there are 450 different schools of therapy, and the war was which is the correct therapy, which is the one to go for. And the research found that, in fact, maybe we were looking in the wrong place. It was the therapist. It was the kind of person the therapist was. Did they have these magic ingredients, empathy, genuineness, and warmth? And that was what got the patient better, not the actual particular theory they were following. And I believe you score very highly on all the key charismatic things that a therapist or a coach needs. But what are your thoughts about that point, that there's something about having someone in our lives who is taking an interest in our lives, but who we have a positive dynamic with, and that is what gets people better or gets people over the finishing line. I just want to finish the point by saying I just use an analogy. I have a tennis coach, and there's something about the fact, if I hit the ball correctly and she says, "Well done, Raj," I mean, that is emotional heroin to me. I live for that moment. Obviously, I turn up because I want to play better tennis, but it's her approval, because she's actually very difficult. She doesn't impress easy. But when eventually she does say, "Well done, Raj," right? There is something about that moment that means I'm addicted to trying to get more of that approval from her, if you see what I mean. So what do you think about that dynamic? Is that important, do you think, in actually why people get better?
I think it's essential. I think it's absolutely essential. So part of being successful, I believe, is that you have got to, in your mind, be 100% on the side of the client. You really, really want them to be successful. You are right there with them. You're with them with their successes, their failures, everything. And you're passionate about them getting good results. I'm very nosy, you see. I like to know all about what's going on with people and why they do certain things and why this is happening and that's happening. And I'm also passionate about people improving and living happier lives and more successful lives, because like, what is life about if it isn't that? Solving problems, that's what we do all day long, isn't it? So I remember, this is going back years ago, and I said I was doing something that was really difficult. I was going to work in Holland, actually. It was my first job in Holland, and I was really worried about it. I thought, well, I know nothing about anything. And I remember my mother, actually, but my mother said, "Oh, of course you can do it. Don't be ridiculous. Of course you can do it. Absolutely you can do it." And it was just her having her complete belief in me that I could do it. I thought, right, if she really believes I can do it, I can do it. And obviously I wanted to prove her right. So I think that has enormous power of people behind you, with you, your coach, your family, your partner, really believing in you. And and giving you all the support, of course you can do it, because you don't want to let them down. Because my view was, oh God, if somebody really believes I can do this, then I better just do it. And I don't want to let them down. And then again, you're talking about the tennis coach. Heroin, absolute mental heroin. Was that how you described it? But I think that's a very good way of
Emotional heroin. But I want to discuss the flip side of that, though, which is that she says, "Oh, don't do that, Raj." And often I do several things on the court. She keeps saying, "Don't do that." That disapproval is also very motivating, because I don't want her to disapprove. So it's not about her being a constant cheerleader. I don't want to annoy her. And when she says, "Don't do that," or "That is not the right thing to do," it really has a big impact. So I'm thinking about why it is we need someone to have a kind of running commentary on our lives to help us get our act together, as opposed to us doing that just for ourselves. But there's something quite powerful, but you do have to respect the opinion. I respect her opinion enormously. I've had other coaches whose opinion I have not respected, and when they've said don't do that or whatever, it hasn't had no effect on me whatsoever. So there's something about that personal connection that's quite important, I think.
Oh God, I think you've got to get a coach who is right for you. They've got to be right for you. They've got to get you. They've got to understand you. But you are completely right about, gosh, it isn't all about being a cheerleader. It's certainly pulling them, saying, oh, well, what actually happened there? Why didn't you do it? And, or you've done it wrong, or, there's certainly that. And them not liking that. And that's very powerful as well, as you say, because then they don't like that. They want to please you. There's a desire to please you. And that is definitely a big element of coaching. They don't want to come to the next session and say, I did nothing.
Yeah, but that comes to another point, which you and I have had a debate over. I think the coach has to be a little bit scary. I think, like in all great relationships, you've got to be a little bit scared of the other person. I'm not sure you've quite agreed with that point, but they've got to be a bit scary in that you want to stay on the right side of them. You like them, you want them to like you, but you're a bit frightened, a little bit, not terribly frightened, but a little bit frightened of them.
I agree. I couldn't disagree with that at all, Raj. A little bit of fear goes a long, long way.
Okay. Now, let's move that now into, you're a coach, you're a professional coach, and you're aware of how you behave in a consultation. So I want to ask you a mischievous question that may lead you to run screaming from the room. But when you meet people at a party, obviously people download, they tell you about their problems. To what extent do you think you have to try to resist coaching in ordinary personal everyday relationships, or to what extent do you think actually everyday conversation does involve a certain amount of coaching? There's a sense in which we are all kind of amateur coaches, everyone else, because everyone's spending their time complaining about something, aren't they? That's a large part of what conversation is about. What are your thoughts about that?
Okay, well, I try not to work while I'm socializing. However, having said that, you can't help it. You find yourself asking powerful questions socially, whether you like it or not. I mean, it just goes with the territory. You can't help it. So sometimes I try not to. I try not to start being nosy or asking good questions, but it's very difficult not to. So I think it does encroach. You can't help it that you're going to ask in your social life questions which are going to be helpful to the other person.
Yeah. But what about this idea that actually what most people do in everyday conversations provide what we call empty reassurance? So people are often complaining about something, and what people say is it'll be fine. So the student says, I did the exam yesterday. I think I've done badly. I may have failed. And everyone goes, I'm sure it'll be fine. They provide this thing called empty reassurance.
Yeah,
what are your thoughts? You must find it toe-curlingly difficult when you sit around and hear the classic empty reassurance that most people are giving in everyday conversation.
Yes, it's not good. It's not good, is it?
Yeah, but what do you think about the fact that maybe some people are looking for that? That's what they're looking for. And often they're looking for that in coaching. A large number of people are coming to therapy and coaching for the wrong reason. They're looking for tea and sympathy, basically, as opposed to someone who's going to produce or help them produce personal change. That's a big tension. That people often think of turning up for coaching or going for therapy is an act of personal change in itself, when it's just the beginning of the work that people need to do. That the tendency for people is to avoid the work and find a way of avoiding the work at all costs.
Okay, well, one of my policies is not to take on clients who aren't motivated. So if you're not motivated, then there's no point in coming to see me, because we won't really be getting very far. So that's point number one. Don't bother if you're not motivated, because cognitive behavioral coaching may seem easy, but it often isn't. You're going to have to stretch yourself. You're going to have to put yourselves in positions of discomfort, and it's going to be difficult. You're going to have to work hard if you want results, if you want to be successful, and there's no getting away from that. So I make that very, very clear at the outset, that this is how it's going to be, and that when we agree that they're going to do certain tasks during the week, that I'm absolutely expecting it to be done. You know, there is not going to be room for sympathy if they haven't done it. I mean, okay, death of someone, that's a good reason. If not, your house burned down, okay, maybe there are very exceptional circumstances why they shouldn't have carried out what we've agreed that they're going to do. But otherwise, it's, you know, I'm not going to be happy. I'm not going to be pleased. I'm going to, you know, question them as to why on earth they didn't do it. And, you know, how's that going to work for you if you don't do what we agreed you're going to do? How's that going to turn out for you is the sort of question I might ask. So quite a little bit harsh, not too harsh, but a little bit harsh, because otherwise they're not going to get what they want. And when they can see that, they can, I think the best thing is when they can actually see, when they do carry out what they're supposed to be doing, that actually they're getting the results, and then that will encourage them to do it the following week and the following week. The other reason why people don't necessarily carry out what they're supposed to do is because they're not sure how to do it. They're still not sure quite how to do it. They haven't got the resources. They're frightened of doing it. They procrastinate. And so that needs to be investigated, usually doing an ABC assessment process or something like that, but it certainly needs to be investigated as to what stopped them from doing it, because this isn't any good, because they won't get anywhere.
What about this point about motivation and lack of motivation and low motivation? What are your thoughts about that, and how to help people be more motivated?
All right, well, you know, motivation is obviously very difficult because it goes up and it goes down and it goes all over the place. So I often tell clients, look, don't expect to be motivated. The motivation may come after you started the task, but don't expect to be motivated. Don't expect to be in the right mood. Don't expect to be enthusiastic about it before you start. But hopefully, as you progress and start getting better at it and finding it more, it will come, it will develop, the motivation. But motivation is such a difficult thing. It really is. That's why I like rewards, because they can be motivational. They're very specific. They're very tangible. Okay, you do this, you have a reward, you buy that handbag, you buy that dress, you go on that holiday, you have a cup of tea. It doesn't matter what it is, but, you know, whatever works. That's much more tangible. But also, I think, as we mentioned earlier, a big form of the motivation comes from the pain of not doing stuff. When they can link up that to not carry out action is more painful than carrying it out, then they're much more likely to carry it out. That's one of my things.
So I've often been feeling, although I like coaching and I have coaching, for example, for tennis, I often feel very sympathetic towards coaches because I think it's very frustrating. Going back to tennis, and I often say to my coach, it must be so maddening that you watch people hit the ball the wrong way all day. You tell them how to hit the ball correctly and they still do it wrong, you know, badly. It's maddening. I'm just impressed at your patience. And I often draw an analogy between what they do and what I do. There's a sense in which one has to be patient with people. So I want to ask you, and again, a tough question in terms of the belief in the human spirit, because ultimately to keep doing what we do, given the frustrations, you have to believe that people can change. Could you say something about that belief in the human spirit, and any examples you could give of transformational change that you've experienced in your coaching experience that keeps you motivated?
Okay, so I think if we never got any change and we didn't succeed with anybody, then we would probably just pack our clogs up. But we do have successes. They may not be quite exactly what we want them to be, realistically, but we do have a lot of successes. So, for example, when I've been coaching in corporations, I've got help people to get pay rises. I've helped them to get promotion. I've helped them to get better jobs. I've helped them to deal with their managers better. I've helped them to deal with their anxieties, their depressions, and so on and so forth. So building up as many little wins as possible and to keep going, and to know that that you're not going to succeed with everybody, because some people aren't going to put in the. I think the main reason it fails is because people won't put in the effort. Because certainly, and you may disagree with me on this, Raj, but as far as I'm concerned, cognitive behavior coaching works. By that I mean we know what's going on in somebody's life. We know what they should be doing to make changes. But if they don't do that, then it's not going to work. Certainly see and assess what's going on very, very clearly and know what they should be doing. So they can't really blame the cognitive behavior coaching if it doesn't work, because they can see that if they did this, then it would work. But not everybody is prepared to do that. We can take the horse to water, we can't make it drink.
And I think that, going back to your point, that everyone needs a coach and everyone could benefit from a coach. There's many industries that are based on the idea of people not getting what they really need, which is the coaching. So let's take the diet industry. The diet industry is a multi-billion-pound industry worldwide.
Yeah.
And most of the time, most diets fail. And part of the reasons they fail are something to do with the motivation and the behavioral change that's required of people. And that is classically slap bang in the middle of what coaching, in my opinion, and to some extent therapy, is about. So the multi-million-pound diet industry will try this next new diet, will buy this book, etc., will buy this recipe book, is a shortcut, because people are looking for a shortcut. They're looking for a magic button or a magic pill, and they're avoiding the fact that probably they need coaching, or coaching of some kind, even if it's self-coaching, is the answer. So everywhere I look, I see people avoiding coaching, or not realizing that coaching of some description, even if it's coaching yourself, is the answer, and they're going for a quick fix, and there's a multi-billion-pound industry based on that. What are your thoughts about that point?
Well, I think it's changing. I think people are becoming much, much more pro-coaching. Certainly in corporations, it's seen more as a badge of honor. It's seen not so much as a luxury. It's more as a way to develop your career, to get on. So I think coaching is becoming much more acceptable than it ever was, which is very exciting. However, it always used to be, a life coach, and everyone would yawn and sort of, oh, life coach. They would view it as a soft option, something, that was just sort of cozy, having a chat. What good is that going to do? But they're not. You see, the thing about coaching is it gives you that one window of opportunity that we don't usually give ourselves, to sit down for an hour or however long it is, and to work out, this is where I am now, what is going on, or this is what I've achieved. I've come quite far. I've actually achieved quite a lot, so that's encouraging. But actually, what do I want to do? What is the next step? What is the next challenge? And giving people the luxury, an hour is a luxurious amount of time, just this for ordinary people, just to be thinking about themselves, their lives, where they're going. And as we mentioned earlier on, that period of silence to do the thinking, the active thinking. So I think thinking is a very active thing to do, can produce all sorts of ideas and creativity that wouldn't arise if the client hadn't been given the opportunity to do the coaching. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but let's go back to the point that you need certain things to be present for people to be coached, like motivation. I want to produce another one, which is thoughtfulness. In a way, what you're saying is people need to take their lives seriously, and they need to be thoughtful about their lives. And if you are taking your life seriously and you're being thoughtful about your life, you will consider something like coaching or maybe therapy. So that notion of being thoughtful is missing a lot, isn't it? We by definition are professions, you and I, part of professions which are embedded in the idea of thinking carefully about stuff. That's why language is quite important. I was having a cup of tea after playing tennis with some people recently. I got to disguise details to protect confidentiality. And one of the people was an author, and the other person was, I think, trying to be interested, but we're asking questions that you and I both, as well, authors know are a bit tricky. Like they said, how many books have you sold? That's a very, very dangerous question. unless you're having tea with John Grisham or Howard Robbins.
Yes.
That's not a very thoughtful question. Is my point, right? The person is wrapped up in their curiosity, but it's not a thoughtful question. So this notion of being thoughtful is something that I think is missing a lot. What are your thoughts?
Well, I think an awful lot of people just muddle along, not really thinking about where they're going or what they want to do in 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, and so on and so forth. And they just hope it's going to be all right. They're sort of living on, oh, well, let's see what happens. Let's just hope. And I don't think that's really good enough. I think we need to design our lives more and work out, actually, okay, by the time I'm 50, I want to have achieved this. I think it's the way to go. It's not that you will necessarily achieve all that, but I think you're much more likely to achieve it if you're really fixed and focused that this is what I want to do over the next 10 years, 20 years. And I think what happens is that people sometimes get despondent about what they achieve in 1 year. But there's a huge difference between what people can achieve in 1 year and what they can achieve in 5 years. So they're short term, they want to have quick fixes. Whereas I think we need to learn long term, bit by bit by bit by bit by bit, where we want to go. And a tremendous amount can happen. And I mean, if we look at your life, I mean, you've achieved extraordinary number of things over a very short period of time, from what I can see.
Well, that's very kind of you to say that, Nicola. Now we're running out of time, and I'm going to ask some quick fire questions. Well, one basic question: the practicalities of going to get coaching. In the short time we've got left, we've got about less than 5 minutes, I'm afraid. Let's talk a bit about that. So, for example, give people a rough idea of the fees they might expect to pay, and how to go about finding a good coach. What to look for in terms of training and credentials, and how many sessions would they have, and how to think about a session and to get a sense of what's a good session in coaching. So let's start with the fees, for example. Give people an idea of the range of fees, if it's not too dangerous a question.
It's a very dangerous question, Raj, as you well know. Okay, so the fees can range from 50 quid to sort of 500 quid, 1,000 quid an hour. So there is a huge range, but just because you're not paying 1,000 quid an hour doesn't mean to say you're going to have a hopeless coach.
What about the training? How to look for a good coach? What credentials to look for?
Well, that again is quite difficult, but you want to have them being members of an association. So make sure that they're a member of a coaching association is a very good start, because in order to do that, they will have had to have done a certain amount of training in order to join up. So that's one thing. The other thing I would always recommend is that you have what's called a chemistry session. So you have one session, some coaches don't even charge for it, where you just see whether or not you can work together well or not. And that's really a very good option. And you can see what type of coaching they're going to do and whether or not it's for you. That's a very good option. Getting a recommendation, I would strongly recommend.
Okay. Yeah. Any things that would be ominous signs, things, because there's a lot of people out there, in my opinion, unlike yourself, who are very good, who are not very good, but they're making a lot of money doing it, and they're not very good. So what are the danger signs, things to look for, to avoid?
I think you need to find out what type of coaching they do. You need to ask them about some of their successes. How successful are they? How success orientated are they? I mean, I like to think, I tell my clients, I am success oriented. We're not messing around here. I really want you to make successes, because if you don't, it looks bad for me, I will tell them. So it's, again, you talked about whether or not the coach is genuine, whether or not they're really on your side, whether or not they've got warmth, whether or not they're going to call you to task. If you haven't done what you said you were going to do, are they going to just, oh, well, it doesn't really matter. They need to have a firm grip on what you're doing. They need to be able to remember what happened in the last session, because I think it's very poor show if you have a coach who can't remember what you did in the last session. They need to give you things to do in between sessions. That's very, very important. I personally think, obviously I'm biased, but I personally think that cognitive behavioral coaching is the best, because of the fact it has the ABC model, which in my opinion, as I've already said, is the best assessment tool on the planet, because we can really drill down and see what's going on in somebody's life in a particular situation, and it gives us very clear guidelines as to what we should be doing. So understanding all the underlying emotions, which cognitive behavioral coaching is about, is very important, as is behavioral change. It's no good having coaching and having a good chat if you're not actually going to change your behavior. And we need to be very clear about what is the definition of success in coaching, how would you know that the coaching has been successful for you? What would need to happen?
So we only got less than 30 seconds left. So I just want to summarize one key point, which is that the coach should be able to explain how it's meant to work. They should explain the treatment rationale. What's the model that they use? How's it meant to work? What am I meant to do? And why is that meant to get me better? They should give a coherent, reasoned explanation of how it's meant to work and give some examples. And they should make sense to you. And if it doesn't make sense, give them a hard time and say, doesn't make sense to me. Why is that going to work? Anyway, Nicola Marting, it's been lovely talking to you. We're out of time. Thank you very much indeed. Nicola Marting, you can find her on the web. She's an excellent coach. Thank you very much indeed.
Raj, thank you very much.